be expected to stand by while rocket attacks from a terrorist organization are launching into their country and impacting innocent civilians. At the same time, in the Secretary's conversations, in the conversations of all of our senior administration officials, they've been encouraging all sides to de-escalate the situation, and certainly we don't want to see any civilian casualties. That is one of the prominent reasons why it's so important to move forward and de-escalate the situation on the ground.
Those who follow doings in this part of the Middle East know the hard and difficult truth. There is rarely, and there may never be, true peace between Israel and Palestine, only a lull in the seeming never-ending war. And now the price of conflict is dangerously rising again. Children have now been killed in rocket attacks. Reserve military is being called up, and Hamas is now reaching deeper into Israel with their weapons. Not just where does it go from here, but is America once again the key to bringing matters under control? Joining us on MidPoint, senior fellow at the American Task Force on Palestine and a weekly columnist for Now Lebanon, Hussein Ibish joins us. Hussein, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, delighted.
Please bring us up to speed on the one issue that people are asking with regard to what is happening there. There is a feeling among some that we are reaching a point of no return in this current battle between Hamas and between Israel. And again, I know that this is just speculation and a personal thought, but how close are we? How dangerous is it become?
It's dangerous, but it's contained. The Israelis are trying to secure their goals only through air power and not to re-enter Gaza. Apparently, they don't really want to unseat Hamas entirely. They want to kind of defang them and degrade their capabilities. But I think they would have preferred not to have engaged in this at all. Hamas is desperate and tried, I think, to foment another uprising in the West Bank. They failed, so then they've gone back to these rocket attacks, which are you know, they're ineffective because upwards of 90% of them are being shot down by Israeli missile defenses, and they're unguided. They're just wild rocket attacks. So I think that really neither side is likely to secure its aims through this set of attacks, and I think this can go on for quite a while without necessarily escalating any further. I think it's very grim, but I think we may have hit a kind of a plateau for the next few days.
Knowing how long that things have gone on this way in this part of the Middle East, is it possible, and you use these words, to actually, realistically defang and degrade Hamas?
In the short run, it is. In the long run, it isn't. I mean, the only way that Hamas really can be totally defanged is for a successful Israeli-Palestinian peace to emerge, and that would be an agreement with the PA and Ramallah and the PLO diplomatically, neither of which are Hamas's rivals, which have terrible relationship with Hamas. Hamas thrives off of the conflict. As do Israeli extremists, and to some extent even the settler movement. So we've got these extremists on both sides who are really dedicated to continuing the conflict. And Hamas found themselves in recent months in a terrible situation, shut down by Egypt entirely, unable to access money that was promised them by Qatar. With the economy in free fall, growing unpopularity in Gaza, high unpopularity for Hamas in Gaza, and growing irrelevancy. They sought to break out of it by making a kind of a reconciliation deal with the PA in Ramallah, but they didn't really get anything out of it. They just sort of supported the government that was formed. They didn't even get any ministries, and nothing was going right for them. So I think that they're looking for a way to kind of break out of this box. But what is ultimately happening is they're just getting pounded, and they may be getting pounded even harder than they had expected. But I don't see the immediate way out. Sooner or later, there'll be a ceasefire. The question is, does Hamas emerge with any benefit from it? Right now, there's no sign of that. The Egyptians aren't. Their main focus, I think, is on Egypt, believe it or not. They'd like Egypt to open the crossing with Gaza. The Egyptians seem totally uninterested in that. They want the Egyptians to facilitate the transfer of money from Qatar and Turkey and elsewhere. The Egyptians are not doing that. And they're also demanding the Israelis release a bunch of people that they rearrested in the past couple of weeks when there were these kidnapped teenagers who were found murdered. They're not going to get that either. So what they can get out of this is a little mysterious to me, but it definitely reeks of desperation.
If there is indeed, as you pointed out, and you used the phrase, a growing irrelevancy then for Hamas, if we take that then at face value, is there a possibility that the Palestinian people themselves may be getting tired with what Hamas is doing, and even though we see street protests in favor of Hamas at times, that perhaps that is a bit of a smokescreen?
Kind of recklessness. But in Gaza, I think people are increasingly fed up. Now, on the other hand, Hamas has a monopoly of weapons, and the only people who challenge them politically are people to their even more religious right than them, Islamic Jihad and some even more extremist groups that are small but deadly. The general public, I think, is totally fed up. And so that's where it becomes very dangerous for them, and also in a funny way for Israel. If they do emerge from this battered with large numbers of people killed, and ultimately in the months following, taking the blame, because you can only sort of point the finger at Israel and President Abbas in Ramallah and the Arab states and the US and everybody and Egypt and whoever else it is for so long. At a certain point, people do start to blame you if you're in charge. And that happened last time around, where they had about a 2-month honeymoon in which people felt very aggrieved with everybody else. But after a while, they started thinking, wait a minute, maybe you guys have some responsibility here. So if they can't come out of this with any kind of tangible benefit, I do think it'll be very difficult for them. On the other hand, the Israelis clearly are worried. One of the reasons they're not interested in going in to Gaza on the ground is that they kind of have relied on Hamas as the address for what happens there, as a group that they know that they can reward with carrots and punish with sticks and kind of deal with. They fear, and I think with all reason, that if Hamas went, something even more extreme might come up. It's going to be very hard to get the PA back in power unless it's a concerted effort with Egypt and something much different than what's happening now. So for them, I think degrading Hamas is one thing, but actually getting rid of them entirely is something else. And I don't think they want to do that, which is why they're doing this only remotely.
Knowing there are always groups in the Middle East that are looking for a way in, that are looking for a ripple somewhere to take power, you used the phrase Islamic Jihad.
Yes.
If indeed Hamas is losing support of the Palestinian people, and if there are people in Palestine who are still looking for someone on their side, someone to take their cause, is there now potentially an opening for, if it's not ISIS or some other Islamic Jihad group, to come in to fill that vacuum and then to finally get what they want, which is to become a key player in the fight against Israel?
Yeah, I mean, not ISIS, I don't think, or the so-called Islamic State, as they've now, these bandits have renamed themselves. I don't think so. They're very much stuck in the no man's land in northern Syria and western Iraq, and that's where they're operating, and really kind of nowhere else. Some people are signing on with them. I think they will spread into Lebanon, by the way. That look for that, but into Gaza, no. Islamic Jihad is an extant organization. It's old. It's almost as old as Hamas. It's small, but it's been growing in popularity in the political extreme. People who might have been attracted to Hamas 10 years ago now find, I think, themselves sometimes drawn to Hamas. But I think what's clear is there's a latent potential of moderation among Palestinians. It's still very high. Hamas tried very hard, I think, in the past 3 weeks with this kidnapping and murder of these Israeli teenagers and riots and other things that they were behind, and playing off of Israel's very hard crackdown against them and others, and just general communities in the West Bank during that period of time, tried very hard to foment an uprising in the West Bank that would unseat the Palestinian Authority and President Abbas and give them a presence in the West Bank. I think that's what they really want, a strong presence. They were unable to do it. And the reason they were unable to do it is, in spite of all the anger and instability and rage and whatnot, most Palestinians in the West Bank had no interest in another uprising against Israel, and that's why it didn't happen. And that's why Hamas has kind of sunk back into this old pattern of rocket exchanges and whatnot, where almost all the death and major destruction is falling into Gaza, and they're firing these rockets at Israel that are scary, but they're not actually killing people or wounding people or doing much damage because of Iron Dome and because the missiles, these rockets, are sort of unguided and primitive. And in the end, I think it's very much a secondary, it's a strategy on their part. They've fallen back on this, in my view, out of desperation. And I don't think right now there's any sign that it's going to pay off. On the other hand, because I think people are worried about the alternative, especially the Israelis are worried about the alternative, it's likely that we'll go back to some kind of status quo ante at the end of this, with the PA in the West Bank, with Hamas in Gaza, and with the Israelis dealing with both very differently.
Hussein Ibish, you have given us a very different perspective on what's going on in the Middle East right now, and certainly one I think that needs a whole lot more discussion here as we watch what happens, and hopefully will end very soon. I thank you very much for your time, and we will do it again very soon.
You are welcome. Thank you.
It is worth discussing that there are other facets here, and to wonder if Hamas is indeed finally reaching the end of its rope with the Palestinian people. Just when you thought there was nothing else to fret over, here comes 7 key Senate races and one senator in Colorado perhaps setting a tone for what is on deck. That's on deck as MidPoint, where we question everything, continues.